Welcome back. This mini-lecture is on the concept of life world, the theory of communicative action. Take a look at this picture of the skydivers and think of this as a metaphor for conflict resolution and harmony. 5 people holding hands in a circle in a risky environment. In this picture, if there is any conflict, they better resolve it pretty fast. In fact, they probably made all their plans and worked through all of their conflicts prior to jumping out of the aircraft. And everything should now proceed safely, with teamwork. The author of the life world theory is Jürgen Habermas, the great German philosopher of our day. I find his theory of communicative action to be especially useful in conflict resolution practice. Life world is rooted in the German Lebenswelt. Some of you may be familiar with the idea of worldview. This is different. I know it's an oversimplification, but to me the idea of worldview has limitations. Granted, worldview theory is valuable in conflict resolution in this sense. It is important to understand that other people have a different way of looking at the world from your own, and that must be considered in conflict resolution. However, in the life world theory, it is not so much about opinion as about how things really are. So let's look at the key elements of life world. For Habermas, the key elements in what he calls communicative space include the objective world and the normative world. Communicative space is something that we should all be familiar with. That is the area that is a time and place where we can seriously communicate important ideas and conflict resolution. For Habermas, the objective world is how the world really is, the facts and the ideas surrounding the conflict. The normative world is related to shared values, norms, including what we believe, how we operate, and how we interact with each other. These are the rules of the social contract. This slide shows the components of the life world. In this case, for 2 actors, life world is encompassed by the box. The external world is outside of the box. The external world is the environment that we work in. It cannot be ignored, but it's really not part of the life world that we sector off for working out our solutions for conflict. Inside the life world is the communicative space, and 2 actors, the objective world and the normative world. As you can imagine, these are going to connect in some way to get to some kind of results. Here I introduce a new concept that I have not mentioned before, the internal worlds. Of all the Habermas concepts, internal world is the most closely aligned with worldview. The internal world is a subjective world, how the actor sees the world, while processing what the actor observes to incorporate those truths into identity. The elements of the internal world really cannot be part of the group activity. This leads us to an important concept. The subjective world is inaccessible to others. As much as you might want to share your subjective world with others, you cannot. They cannot understand, and you cannot explain. Therefore, it cannot be used effectively in conflict resolution. Though a major part of each actor cannot enter into the communicative space, we do put ourselves into the communicative space, a sort of image of ourselves. Also, bear in mind that there is an external world that could affect the actors, but as we communicate, we can put the external world aside, just as we do with the subjective worlds. Now we add other factors to the communication space: culture, language, beliefs, and you could probably name a number of other things that you have found important in communicating in the conflict resolution context. And that's also where worldview may be a factor. Culture and language affect worldview, and they affect communication space. So in this case, we have to understand the cultures of the others. It's a matter of being open-minded, but also being fair while maintaining standards. In addition, we have to be able to communicate in the same language, perhaps requiring a trustworthy interpreter in the communication space. Let's get to the meat of the concept of communicative action. In the communication space, there is a lot of activity going on. The arrows show that there is information being passed on to each of the other worlds. For example, the subjective world is built up from the activity in the communication space. Remember that it is like a one-way street. Information can go into the subjective world, but it can't come back out. And here's an important aspect of this concept. We are building up the objective world. Who are the parties? What are the issues? What are the needs? What are the disagreements? What are the interests? And here's the part I really like. The normative world also benefits from the activity in the communication space. These would be ideas like how we can connect in meaningful ways, how we will come to an agreement, how we will honor the values of others, and a number of other things. I have found the normative world is an area that we work in all the time as a society. It is dynamic in a liberal democracy. For example, in my research, I communicated with people holding different religious views on bioethics. But I found that there were norms that everybody agreed on. Things like do not murder and love one another. The disagreements arise when it comes to what you mean by simple concepts like do not murder. In a liberal democracy, we establish norms through conversation, through investigation, and in fact through passing laws. However, there are a number of norms that are not established in the legal system, and you can probably think of these things that you just do normally to get along in society. And naturally, these things were developed through communication space.